To say that we're with you, we're going to stay with you, and this is rebuilt until it's totally finished. We're going to try to do that in as quick a time as possible. And I told the governor, there's no more important project right now in the country as far as I'm concerned. I've directed my team, not figuratively but literally, to move heaven and earth to get it done as soon as humanly possible. So since Sunday morning, we've worked closely with Governor Shapiro, Senators Casey and Fetterman, and Representative Boyle, it's his district, and Mayor Kenney to provide the necessary federal assistance to support an all-hands-on-deck response to this crisis. It is a crisis. And I want to thank these officials for working collaboratively, effectively, efficiently with each other and with our federal team. I also want to thank the first responders who dealt with the immediate aftermath and the workers on site. We saw some of them today as we flew over to the site. We've been working 24/7 to clear the debris. Within hours of the crash, officials from the U.S. Department of Transportation were on the ground supporting Pennsylvania officials to get the site cleared and be able to start.
Folks, we finally have some breaking news surrounding the fourth stimulus payment. So welcome back to my channel, everybody. This is your fourth stimulus check update and daily news report.
Of cutting Social Security benefits. And as far as I'm concerned, never on my watch will that happen. We made a promise. We made a promise that you work hard, that you pay into this system, and that it would be there for you. And we cannot make it break America's promise to our seniors.
Now, Senator Bernie Sanders, chair of the Senate Budget Committee, drafted a $6 trillion infrastructure package that Senate Democrats are considering approving without GOP support. That's according to people familiar with the matter. But Senator Sanders is pushing for aggressive federal action to overhaul the economy. After a meeting with Senate Democrats, Bernie Sanders said, "We have an enormous amount of work in front of us." Bernie Sanders talked about federal intervention on things like climate change, affordable housing, and the urgency to level the playing field for average families. Bernie Sanders also stated that Democratic efforts to approve a party line bill and reconciliation would commence within weeks. "We expect to have a whole lot done in July," he said. A spokesperson for the Senate Budget Committee declined to comment, but Senator Sanders later told reporters that he is seeking a certain amount of spending. The bottom line here is this country faces crisis. Working families are struggling, and it's about time we paid attention to their needs. Now if you folks agree with Bernie Sanders and his push and the push for more stimulus payments, then let's get this video to 1,000 likes.
A foundation for future American prosperity for years and decades to come through smart and bold investments in our nation's infrastructure. As I've said for weeks, the discussions about infrastructure legislation continue.
Reconciliation is a legislative tactic that only requires 51 votes, though it involves strict budgetary rules. Sanders said this week that his reconciliation bill would include an expansion of Medicare, which would cut the eligibility age to 60 from 65. Senate Democrats are also weighing including immigration reform provisions in a reconciliation bill to help finance part of the infrastructure plan, underscoring their ambition. Democrats narrowly control the Senate and hold a thin majority in the House. They are still negotiating a potential bipartisan deal with Republicans, which has already seen opposition from key progressives, including Sanders. Those talks received a boost on after more GOP and Democratic lawmakers signed on to the skinnier infrastructure bill, expected to focus on traditional elements like roads and bridges. It will be largely financed with unspent relief funds and existing spending. The White House is giving the bipartisan talks until the end of the month and could potentially switch gears, pushing Republicans aside and prioritizing a Democratic-only bill. It may be Sanders' $6 trillion one. Some of Congress Democrats agree with a fourth round of stimulus payments, and some of you can actually receive an extra stimulus check this week. 36 million American families are expected to start receiving monthly relief payments this week. Eligible households will get up to $250 for every child ages 6 to 17, and as much as $300 for each kid for each dependent under 6, all the way through December. The cash being provided under a temporary expansion of the child tax credit will be delivered on or around the 15th of every month. The American Families Plan, introduced by President Biden, seeks to provide aid to American families, invest in teachers and education, and ensure comprehensive paid family leave and subsidized childcare. A desperately needed plan that will no doubt boost women's workforce participation, which has fallen to levels not seen since the 1980s. However, the American Families Plan cannot be signed into law without support in both the House and evenly divided Senate. And so far, the plan has been met with resistance from Republican lawmakers, despite the fact that 60% of U.S. voters support the plan. However, Biden administration officials are holding informal discussions with policy experts and lawmakers in an attempt to pressure GOP members of Congress and consolidate support for key components of the plan, such as the long-term extension of the child tax credit and paid parental leave, two of which are many aspects of the American Families Plan with broad bipartisan support. At a briefing, the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement and a senior advisor to the president said that the American Families Plan and American Jobs Plan marks an unprecedented investment in care by the Biden administration. If passed, the plan will ensure that low and middle income families spend only up to 7% of their income on childcare. Folks, that is all the news in this video. If you guys found this video useful and helpful, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give this video a like.
Back in April, when the president said we would move forward on two tracks, that we would seek a bipartisan agreement on infrastructure, and that we would work with Democrats on a budget reconciliation process that included key components of the American Families Plan, there was some skepticism about the possibility of that moving forward, and that's a diplomatic definition of how their broad reaction was. That's exactly what is happening now, and in our view, this is how the legislative process works.
American Rescue Plan, one of the largest federal stimulus measures in history, to help bring an end to the economic downturn and prime our economy to come roaring back. Now, millions of Americans have come off the unemployment rolls and small businesses have reopened from coast to coast. More than 150 million Americans have been fully vaccinated. We need, of course, to keep up the effort to inoculate the rest of the country. But suffice it to say, we are well on our way to bringing the country out of chaos, out of crisis, and back to normal. But the task is not done. As our country reopens and Americans return to work, we must turn our attention to laying a foundation for the future. This upcoming work period will focus on exactly that, building a foundation for future American prosperity for years and decades to come through smart and bold investments in our nation's infrastructure. As I've said for weeks, the discussions about infrastructure legislation continue along two tracks. On the bipartisan track, our committee and the well-connected while leaving ordinary families in the lurch. The latest GOP tax scam feels like a bad rerun, where the biggest winners are giant companies, big oil polluters, ultra wealthy households. After the Trump tax law blew a nearly $2 trillion hole in our national debt, forecasters say this new Republican proposal would increase the debt by another $1 trillion. Can you believe this? Just 2 weeks after these hard-right Republicans are arguing that we have too much debt,